Today we're painting some rust. So many different ways to paint rust. Today we're going to be doing it a little medium rust, not a full cover rust. And we're going to be using exclusively washes. So we're going to build up the rust very slowly. We are working on some Rackham Confrontation Orcs here. And beginning with a black undercoat. You always want to begin with a black undercoat whenever you're doing any of the gray metallic paint jobs. And then over that, going over it with Vallejo Metal Color Burnt Iron. For the highlights, we are going to be mixing in some Vallejo Metal Color Pale Burnt Metal. And this is a slow process because highlighting metallics in the standard way that I normally use, layering, does prove a bit difficult because of the solid material in the paint. The metal flake means that it's very prone to leaving lines, especially if you spray it afterwards with a dull coat or some sort of varnish. Those lines really stand out. So we want to thin the paint slightly, but also the transition between colors we're going to make very, very subtle. That's one of the reasons why dry brushing kind of works better for metallics than regular layering, because the dry brushing helps deposit those metallic flakes better. But I'm trying to do things a bit more subtle here. It takes a lot more work, but it does take a lot more time. I'm not going to go through every single highlighting step because there's about 10 here, and they're all just repeating the exact same thing. Just add a little bit more of the pale burnt metal to the mix and continue to highlight in the smaller area. Application of the highlights, of course, you want to do with an overhead highlighting scheme. Something like the big blade here, since the sharp portion of the blade is facing down, I'm actually pretty much not highlighting that at all. I'm trying to keep very angled areas on the blade, so there's a bit more stark contrast as the light catches the edge of it. In general, painting big flat areas is always difficult, and especially when you're painting them big flat metallic areas is even more difficult. So everything we're doing here is more effective on the small armored plates rather than the giant blade that I'm sure everyone's focusing on right now, because that's taking up so much of the camera. And after about 10 or 12 steps, we finally get to our final highlight, which is Vallejo, the same pale burnt metal that we've been using throughout this whole thing. Finally got up to a straight mixture rather than adding it with the burnt iron and just highlighting all the edges and everything. So would like to call it quits now, but unfortunately no, we're doing rusted metal. So now that we made this all nice, clean, shiny metal, we're gonna screw it up. For the rust, we are starting off with Vallejo Game Color Brown Ink. Very, very thin. It's almost not visible here. We're going to be doing this in glazes, so very, very thin layers of ink applied multiple times. Applying it in the recessed areas away from the sharp area of the blade and more in between the plates of the armor, and also some areas where I want to darken, I want a bit more shade. As I said, multiple layers here, so don't do it all in one go. And on those flat areas of the blade, rather than just brushing the ink across, trying to stipple it, so get more a non-uniform look to the rust, more patchy. But very thin layer. The first one's not going to show up too well. Let it dry, and then go over it again and keep adding until you know it's time to stop. You know, that's whenever you realize you have enough rust. And here is the brown ink glaze after about 3 or 4 complete layers of rust added, just to give you an idea how far we go with this one color right now. Next comes Vallejo Game Color Skin Wash Ink. This has a bit brighter, has a bit more orange color. We're working our way towards more brown yellowish rust colors, and this is applied just like the other brown ink, however just in a smaller area, closer. We're still starting in the recesses, but we're not working our way as far out. Again, don't want a perfectly smooth coats. You know, we kind of want it a little blotchy, a bit more like real organic rust. So, you know, just applying it, stippling on the blade, and occasionally I'll just, you know, dab it with my finger if I think I put too much on, or, you know, just to soften it. But again, working it in towards the recesses and out towards the central areas of the plates, and just not as far this time. And once again, this is not just a single coat here. This is very, very thin coats, letting it dry, and then going back and adding more color until we reach the desire that we want for the particular miniature. So this is about, I kind of lose track when I'm doing this, but I probably turn the figure around maybe about 4 or 5 times. Mainly just depends on, you know, achieving that result where you're finally happy and ready to move on to the next color. Next comes the orange ink. Don't worry, don't bother looking for orange ink. You just need red and yellow, and we mix it up to find a nice bright orange color. And again, just like before, starting in the recesses and working our way down. Since I didn't want a super heavy rust here, that's more a light coating, this color is used very sparingly, mainly just in the recesses and in a few little spots here and there where I wanted to add a bit more variety or a bit more color. So this one's not applied in 5 or 6 coats. This is only maybe about 2 or 3, and again, just where I think areas where heavy amount of rust would really collect. And our final ink is black ink. The black is not actually being used to create a rust effect. Instead, we're using it for contrast. The black is only being used in areas where plates overlap one another, or around the rivets, or where the axe blade meets the trim that's going to eventually be painted a different color. So we're not using it to work the rust in. It just mainly contrasts between one area from another, so they pop better. And then finally, a little bit of cleanup work going back to the pale burnt metal, and we're picking out the rivets, making them all nice and shiny, and also cleaning up the blade in any areas that I deem fit. Making the rivets nice and clean may not actually be effective for a rust effect. However, it does make them pop and makes the project a bit more interesting. So I do like to have nice clean rivets, even though they're surrounded by a lot of rust. And for the blade, again, that big flat area that's very difficult to paint, we can stipple on a little bit of metal color to help redefine the rust, give it a bit more variety, make it a bit more interesting, cover up any mistakes that we did. But we do want to just kind of stipple it on and not try to brush it at this point, because we're going to really damage the rust effect. So, just a little bit of here and there, cleaning up those areas that we see fit. And there we go. Our orc is all finished, along with a few of his buddies. It's a very easy technique to use here with all this, all the washes, everything like that. It's very hard to screw up. One of the benefits of using multiple layers of something like the glazes here, I think we used about 24 total. If you screw one up, it's okay, because it's going to be very subtle, and you're going to hopefully do the next one correctly and concentrate and re-emphasize more of the correct areas. So you do have margins for error when doing this technique. The only advice I really give you in the end is stippling, I think, is the most important thing. Subtle changes between the colors, slowly building up to those layers, those glazes of inks, but stippling. We don't want a smooth coat on any of this, so no broad brush strokes over the entire surface of the armor or the weapons. Stipple on those colors, slowly build them up that way, so there's variation in the blade, which makes for a much more effective light rust effect. And that's all I have to say. So I hope you enjoyed our nice little stippled rust, and we will be painting the rest of this orc a little bit later on, so don't have to tell me that you want to see it, because you will. For this though, I think we're done. Thanks for watching.